So, what did I do that was so wrong? First of all, this girl wanted a conversation with me, and we had a Skype conversation. And I was trying to get her to see a different perspective and in the best interest of her child and to prevent future abuse. Because it's my theory that women are attracting the abuse. They want to experience abuse. And I have a long, long history of abuse. It's a hard pill to swallow. Um, to know that. I've offered to volunteer in women's shelters because I've been in a lot of them, and I know that they were lying constantly. So it's like, what is the lie? When I went to volunteer at a women's shelter, it was under the condition that I tell women the truth. And she specifically told me, we cannot tell women the truth or we lose our funding. So it's like, well, what is the truth? What is this? What is being said in women's shelters that you would lose your funding if you actually told women the truth? Well, when I was in a women's shelter, all I could see were people um, hating an awful lot, scheming an awful lot. Um, there were women that were in pure terror, um, had no clue how to survive. And when you go into a women's shelter, what they do is try and get you to hate your spouse. Um, it's almost like when you go into a women's shelter, it's not a place where you get any healing or you actually get any help or you can actually set up another place to go and live. I mean, it's the same thing as religion trying to stop somebody from having an abortion. It's like you're there for the birth, but then when it comes to um, feeding a child and looking after a child and um, all of the reasons that you shouldn't have a child right now, um, religion wants you to live in that environment, wants a baby to live in that environment. Not to say that I'm for abortion. It's like you should have thought um, of your actions before getting pregnant. And it's a really tricky subject to even talk about because women do get pregnant because of rape. Um, but then again, if we are all agreeing to this abuse, if we are all the creators of the abuse, then you do have to take responsibility. Nobody does anything to you that you don't want done to you. And that is one massive pill humanity needs to wake up to. How many of us on a global basis, those that are on the bottom, are suffering? And we all want to blame the guys at the top for being the guilty ones because they're the controllers. And, we don't have that option. Well, we have free will. Um, we have the option to obey crime or not to. But what is crime? You know, a criminal that writes a law that says torture is legal. So we've got on the books that says torture is a good thing. So is that right? Is that true? Will that not reflect in our society that, if government writes a law that says torture is legal, do you not think that you're going to let everybody know in your society that, hey, if you want to know information, all you have to do is torture a person because it's legal? It's the right thing to do. Um, so getting back to a women's shelter, when I was in there one time, I was dealing with my daughter was 15 at the time. I had just moved from Ontario to Alberta, and go check your maps, it's quite a long distance. I had been dealing with a battle with my ex-husband for years. He was constantly bribing my daughter to go and live with him, always giving her gifts and promises of gifts. Never actually gave any gifts. They were always just promises of gifts. And those promises of gifts always came when I was trying to be a good parent and discipline. So it took away all my ability to parent, because anytime I did, there was this deadbeat offering, oh, you can have this and you can have that, and just leave and live with me. And then he would manipulate her to fly from. I had to leave the province he was in because he was that abusive. I couldn't function, work, do anything living in the same province as him, because I even moved out of the same town and stayed in the province, and he followed me there. Um, so it's like I needed distance so that I could function. So I moved to Ontario, and so he was in Alberta, and every time he had these little bribes, and then he would make life a living friggin' hell for my daughter. And uh, so then she'd be off on the streets and in a totally different province, and I'd have to figure out a way of flying her back home. And it was starting to escalate so much, and I had to put a stop to it because he constantly was going to court without serving me, and was constantly letting the courts think and believe that my children have lived with him when they actually lived with me, and he had court orders where I owed him child support. He never was paying child support, but he had orders where I had to pay him. I'm making minimum wage. I'm trying to feed my kids, pay for flights every time he, does his little bribe thing, and leaving no money left for food or rent or clothes, your basic needs for a child, was always going towards um, defending or battling or solving whatever problem this ex of mine was creating all of the time. So I was in um, trying to fix these court orders, which took years. And I finally got one order that needed to be confirmed in Alberta, which, to my understanding, my ex had gone to court and presented all of his evidence, and I was never notified of it. So I had gone to a different province, got an order based on the evidence that I was giving, and everything that was said that granted me that interim order was supposed to go to another judge in a different province, and all he was supposed to do is weigh, my ex's evidence over my evidence. And since I've never, and the judge told me that because of the level of lies that were going on, I needed to show up in person or forget it. It would be meaningless and hopeless. So naturally, I had no money to fly to Alberta. So I had to use my rent money. So in order to fight this, I had to go homeless, um, to be able to solve this court issue. And my daughter is now doesn't, she's in Alberta, can't move back with me because I need to fight this friggin' legal system that is making her hop back and forth. And so I just told her stay there until I get there. And when I got there, no place to stay, so we stayed in a women's shelter. Now my daughter is 15, pissed off as hell, wants to get as far away from family as possible. Even me. She just didn't want to get caught up in the he said, she said battle between the two of us. I can really understand where she's coming from, that get as far away from family as possible, because family was pretty screwed up. And she wanted to um, go back to Ontario and stay with all of her friends. And it's like, you're 15, and she's just about to turn 16. So as a mom, I was first of all, didn't fight her because I have all of my parenting abilities have been taken away from me. My ex has now for years convinced my children never to listen to anything I've got to say. So any type of parenting, you can discipline, they laugh and walk out the room. Like there is no discipline. There's nothing because they laugh at anything that you do or say. So it was um, I had to be extremely creative to parent my children without discipline. And that's why I say that discipline is the worst possible thing you can do. There's so much more better, effective ways to motivate a child to do the right thing. So, anyways, I'm in this women's shelter, and there was supposed to be a lot of counseling for my daughter and for me, yet I could never access any of that counseling. And then my daughter could get into, like, first of all, my daughter had a fear of counselors because at one time I had grounded them in the basement 10 minutes before they were to visit with their father because they were screaming bloody murder in their bedroom. So I grounded them in the basement where all their toys were. And because I was enemy number one in my kids' eyes because they were being disciplined for their behavior, picked them up, and the first thing he did, because my kids were real pissed off, is took them to a walk-in counseling clinic, where the story got twisted and is in legal documents in affidavits stating and accusing me of locking my children in basements for days without food and water. Nothing could be further from the truth. And once my daughter had seen how her words were twisted after she calmed down and seen that my ex manipulated a professional counselor into telling my daughter that I was the worst parent on the planet and she should never even visit, speak, or have anything to do with your mother ever again. And it's like, how messed up is that? Now my daughter knows that that was nothing but manipulation. Our medical profession will use your emotional state to make you more dysfunctional. They don't heal anything, they actually create more problems. And so now this daughter is really scared to even talk to any counselor. She doesn't trust any of them. I don't trust any of them. Well, it's not like I don't trust them. I trust myself now, not to be manipulated by them anymore. Um, but she had gone in and talked to some of these people in the women's shelter, and they were basically encouraging a 15-year-old girl to leave her parents and move across the country by herself. They were actually encouraging that behavior. And I'm like going freaking nuts. I'm trying to get my daughter to stay, that it's not healthy. How is she going to fend for herself? How is she going to feed? I mean, all of the logical things. She's 15. How the hell is that going to be the best thing for her to go provinces away from family that cares and loves her? And at the same time all of this was going on, all of my other children, my ex and his wife, were all um, giving me a hard time for trying to support this daughter. Were I was being called every name in the book, and my daughter was also being, oh, she's just a drama queen, and she's this and she's that, and she doesn't, like to obey rules, and just let her go. So I was fighting my whole entire family. I was fighting the whole women's shelter, everybody that was in there. Um, Everybody was against me and my opinions that my daughter should stay, and everybody wanted her to leave. So, and I'm, in a women's shelter. I'm going through freaking hell. This was like going on, I think it was like 8 years at that time that I was living through nothing but pure torture. And I still had to be there for my daughter to make sure she didn't leave. So, um, what I did, because she's really, really into horses, I was in full support. You can't go against the energy. You got to go with it. You're strongest when you go with it. My daughter wanted to leave, so I said, okay, I'll be in full agreement. I'll support you 100% in leaving if you just give me a little bit of time. Give me 1 month, and if you still want to leave, then leave. So that opened the door. I'm going to continue.